Okay. Welcome everybody to the second webinar of Ocean Insight series of the Early Career Scientist Network of IAE2. And I am Dr. Sudhish from Central University of Kerala, India. And the whole team is very happy that you took the time to be with us, and our incredible speaker, Dr. Naidu, this morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Some quick housekeeping announcement before welcome our speaker. As you as attendees can pose your questions to the speakers by typing in the chat box. And the chat box can also be used to share additional information or if you have any logical issues. So let me introduce our speaker, Dr. Sura Appalanaidu. He's a marine biologist. Dr. Naidu has completed his PhD degree from CSIR National Institute of Oceanography, Regional Center, Visakhapatnam. Afterward, he joined Ministry of Earth Sciences, Center for Coastal Research, National Center for Coastal Research, Chennai, as a project scientist since 2015. His research interests and contributions are quite diverse, ranging from studying benthic ecology, food web dynamics, health of ecosystem to investigating marine plastics in benthic biota. He has published several papers in peer-reviewed journals and showcasing his expertise and commitment to the advancing scientific knowledge in this field. Dr. Naidu is a POGOSCORE Fellow in 2019, and he has an active member of professional organizations such as Ocean Society of India, Marine Biological Association of India, and ISCA. And today, Naidu will talk about the macrofaunal biodiversity research along the Eastern Arabian Sea. Over to you, Naidu. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you, Sudhish, Femi, Arvind, and Nimit for the ECSN IAOE. Whatever this seminar is going on, which is much more informative and at the same time, which is good interaction between us, then among us that various kinds of the research activities we can discuss it. Last time 2015 Dr. Elias Hood and Peter Burkle and Arvind and Shanaisa, we all are discussed last time regarding these things also, and it is now it is came into that one group, ECSN group, and thank you for this. My name is already, he said, our Sudhish Naidu, working in National Center for Coastal Research. So basically, I'm a benthic ecologist, and some part of studies we are working in this in microplastics extraction from these benthic organisms. Since we are a biologist, we are concentrating on that. Now today talk on that macrofaunal biodiversity research. Some studies have been done in the Arabian Sea. What studies have been done? So what are the results we got and what we need to do further, and this kind of things let us discuss. And this is the outline of my talk. Majorly we can discuss about some briefly on this, what are the macrobenthic organisms and their significances in this ecosystem or this functioning, some kind of in biogeochemistry aspects also, that kind of elemental cycling, how these organs are important, and the particular about the study area in the Eastern Arabian Sea, and regarding that, what kind of methods we are using for the collection. And as you know that so many complex and severe threats on these coastal and marine ecosystems, and briefly talk about, and what kind of oceanographic processes, particularly the terrestrial and ocean influences on this, the Eastern Arabian Sea. And the studies of benthic inventory along the shelf and slope, and controlling factors, and small amount of microplastic studies in the benthic organisms and the challenges. So the purpose of the talk is that the literature collection from this current knowledge to understand the benthic macro or micro or meo or megafauna, these are. And in the current methodology and the different approaches what we are using, and further the futuristic research, what kind of biodiversity studies or ecosystem function studies which we are needed. Now, since different backgrounds of community of people we are listening today, and in which and a little so many non-biologists also there. That's the reason that simply we can brief out and in the biological terms of these kind of things. So the benthos, which are the organisms living in the sediment or on the sediments. So typically we can term as a benthos, either in the estuarine environment or coastal environment or marine environment. In the seabed, they can be live. And part of the benthic organisms also lives in these pelagic waters as well. So then these benthic organisms, typically we can classification done on that based on the habitat and based on the sizes as well. So the habitat where they live, either in fauna or epifauna. So these organisms are living in the sediment, typically we can say the in fauna, whereas so organisms on the sediments, we can say the epifauna. So surface of the sediments we can say. And these organisms, we can classify it macro, mega, micro, meso, like that, meo. So megabenthos, we can say typically the size ranges of 1 to 3 per mega, whereas 0.5 micro, 0.5 mm or else 500 microns, we can typically termed as that macro, whereas 63,500 microns for meo and less than 63, we can say this microbenthos. So this is the typical classification, but they are still vary even the depth and the place where we are collecting, whether in the shallow regions our study we are doing, or else in that the deeper regions where we are studying. These all things are matters in terms of classification. So these are some of the figures which we have shown here. So they're highlighting it. So these are the things highlighting it here. See some organisms on the surface, some are in the sediments. So this is a epifauna, this is infauna. Now some of the polychaetes and interstitial. So the sediments granules in the between the granules, these organisms will live, this meo and micro benthos. So now the point here is that why we need to study these organisms and what their role is there is really important. Yes, we can say it is highly important. We need to study these organisms. So these organisms typically major role in that this bioturbation and bioirrigation, which is important in transport of this element cycling, transport of nutrients as well as this carbon or the nitrogen. So the elemental cycling as well. So the deeper the sediment, something like few centimeters to even meters as well. Of course, some of the organisms can burrow the sediments. For say here, this is the some of the holes, crab holes. This is some kind of beaches. So fully oxygenated sediments on the super layers, subsurface layers, something like centimeters to something like meter level as well. These are the crab burrows. So effectively working the sediment reworking processes, because this nutrients, which is enormous nutrients, which is not utilized in the sediments, which are again come back into the surface layers, which can reworking the transfer of these nutrients, something like here. And similarly, the oxygen, the oxygenated water layers can go into that. There again, this deoxygenated water turns into the oxygenated water. So basically the pumping of oxygen or some kind of whatever the minerals So the organic matter remineralization. So many things can helps by these organisms, by their locomotion or their feeding activities. These all things can help them, this kind of process. And at the same time, the food aspect, these are the organisms we are using in this marine food web studies particularly. So these macrobenthos are eaten by these megabenthos, and these macrobenthos separately eaten by the fishes, so which can support this demersal fisheries as well. So the overall link up on that, bioindicator species as well. Now, when we study some particular ecosystem or the particular environment, either coastal or some kind of environment, so the presence of the organisms, we can assess that what kind of environment it is. Per se, the organically polluted the region. For say here, the casuarids like Atromasters, some ceratulates or Casuaridae, or some kind of a Captylidae family species can be available. That itself indicates that the system is something like organically enriched that environment. And here, overall, some other purification, water purification also, these organs are highly useful for this, keep on filtering these waters, and the metal pollutants, we can say these organisms as a candidate species for the things. And at the same time, some kind of bivalves, these gastropods using for this paleo environmental reconstruction for the proxies of this, the paleosaline or environmental. So date back around something like, recent past 200 to 300 years back, what kind of temperature or saline or some kind of a chemical composition. So many things we can do based on this organism analysis. So the typical sampling, how we can do these organisms, wherever the sampling, whether it is the estuarine or marine or the coastal deep ocean, these all. So based according to the, the study region, we can take up some kind of either small grafts like a Van Veen or Peterson or McIntyre grafts or like that. So we can collect the samples from the ship. Then after collection, after getting the graft from bottom, then the samples washed through this some kind of messes, then fixed up with 5 to 10% formaldehyde with rose Bengal solution. So then identify under the stereo microscope, then calculation, we can start estimation of that biomass and abundance, these all things. So this is the overall snapshot of that, how to collect, where, these all things, that are typical. And to look at, there are mainly two steps are involved, the field sampling, another one is the laboratory sampling. So later we can analyze the samples with using the different taxonomic keys, and based on the keys we can identify what is polychaete, what is the amphipods, crustaceans, molluscans, gastropods, like that, either general level or the species level or family level, based on our interest and our expertise as well. So these are some of the review literature, particularly we are using for the identification of either polychaetes or gastropods, molluscans from our side. So as I earlier discussed that, yes, various threats are there, no? These are the threats or the stresses on this, any kind of ecosystem. So everywhere, these are the highlighted some of the globally important drivers, or we can say the stresses on this ecosystem. So the marine ecosystem, which is now that emerging on this kind of pollutants or expanding of this oxygen minimum zones, for say the depletion of the oxygen and getting this ocean is acidified, this acid concentrations are increasing, and dredging, overfishing, heating, heat lossing. So many things are happening. So some of the things at least we can let us see how it will be. So now the oceanographic processes in this Arabian Sea, particularly we have to talk about two kind of things here. The convective mixing and upwelling is the more prominent, in this region. And here you see the typical, various kinds of currents, typical currents in this basin, Arabian Sea basin. In the northern Indian Ocean, this is majorly characterized by these various kinds of currents, and which is the seasonally shifting of these currents and the transport of various kinds of this water masses and characteristics, which can impact on this water column biology or pelagic level as well as this benthic level. So before that, we need to understand much more this kind of, the physical as well as the chemical composition are also much more important, which is driving processes and which can be the impact certainly on this kind of biology. So here, this is the current patterns as well, taken from some of the references this, and various kinds of, the saline and high saline, low saline water masses from different times of time periods, the monsoon and non-monsoon, this kind of seasonal behaviors, as well as that oxygen concentrations. Typically, this is a perennial system, and next slide we can talk about that. So the oxygen keep on decreasing, and decomposition and other physical process and many things involved on that. So this is a typically one of the studies from this Meadows, and we have done it, the study. This et al. Recently published on this work. And you see here, this first ever in Indian EEZ, though 10 continuous time series observations we have done it, right from 6 to 22 degrees of this north. And this is the typical concentrations of oxygen concentrations, how they are varying with reference to the seasons. In the highly peakest monsoon, in the August to September, in the south and below the south and north central, which is the system, how they are behaving, we can see. And also the typical variability of this salinity and temperature, various kinds of densities of water masses, as well as this, the different gradients of temperatures as well. We can see that clearly here based on the season. So now the point here is that our Arabian Sea is a very well known and prominent for this hypoxia, depleting this oxygen, where something like 60 micromoles or below, like that. So this is earlier we thought of that anthropogenic activities is much more some kind of fertilization. These all processes are impacting on that, these coastal regions. So the depletion of this oxygen. But now that recently in the from our Meadows, Dr. Gupta et al. Has recently proved that this is rather than anthropogenically, that naturally the driven hypoxia or naturally driven oxygen deficient zone, which is the world's largest zone in this. So this kind of behaviors or this kind of characteristics of the bay, then how this biota is sustaining in that, this is the question we need to think about in this pelagic as well as the benthic environment, because which both are interlinked or coupling mechanisms. So we cannot neglect, based on this study, we cannot neglect this kind of things. So, and similarly, and another study published by Sudhis et al., there is a clear variability, at least at one site, in this Kochi site, the variability of this, the temperature gradients. So this is the typically how it is forming, and let's say based on this lesser living, this upwelling time, what kind of process is taking place, now the planktons blooms are coming and depleting this oxygen, then it intensification, then impact on that biota as well, these all things. So what we want to say is that this zone is, so what we thought from the earlier studies, this is entirely different. This is a new kind of data that has been derived from the recent observations. Hence, we did not know much more on this benthic responses or the pelagic biota responses, or at the same time, the food web responses in the fishery level as well. So these are the typical benthic organs now we are speaking about. Let us see here where the high amount of oxygen is there or where the low oxygen is there, around 15 micromoles or something like that, then you see the organism's behavior, the expanding of the gills. So the low condition time, these gills are expands and branchial, the polychaetes, whatever, some kind of crustaceans, or expands that particular mechanism to sustain in that environment, the ecologically. And to understand this kind of patterns and the impact of this minimizing of these oxygens or spreadings, so how it will be impact, the study earlier done by Dr. Ingole et al., this Eastern Arabian Sea, then the clear gradients they have noticed on that. So where the oxygen is there, the behavior is one way, the response in this community, whereas where the oxygen is not there or limited oxygen, the response is something like different. And at the same time, certain particular families are responding to this oxygen, so which are withstanding in that environment, like sphenoids and coseriates, which are keep on increasing their composition percentage wise. So which means denoting that this oxygen lowering conditions are increasing, which means a depleting of oxygen, then enhancing this particular dominated species. So after that, another studies has been done. Sorry, another study by CMLRE and Abdul Jalil et al. So that clearly they observed that the upwelling system, so consequences hypoxia, so the triggering of these polychaetes and crustaceans, this all up to 30 meters to 200 meters, they have studied. So onset of monsoon around June time and peak monsoon during the August and September time, the responses we can see the clear here. So the particular abundance of this polychaetae, like as we mentioned that sphenoids, coserids or capitalids, the coserids and some kind of response of this marginal families are responding enormously increasing these species. So the overall, so far that our CMLRE Ministry of Earth Sciences, in which this Sagar Sampada, many cruises have been conducted from this different from 9th to the present and different plans. So 50 cruises around on that, on the only in that cruise, and many benthic studies and around something like 200, 300 sites were covered. And this is the recent review et al. By Sonia Sukumaran. She has much more elaboratedly what kind of studies have been done and different journal wise she has done it and various habitats. So this is the typical way back from 1949 to and present up to around 2020 she has done it. She made it these studies on that. So overall this molluscans communities particularly are dominated in these regions. So later these annelids followed by in other communities as well. So what so far this inventory is saying is that around 2078 species which are noticed in that belongs to 14 phyla from the northwest coast of our India, thus margin. So in which polychaetae around 617 species and gastropods are 602, and again these are all listed here. So later another study by Sivadas and Carlo et al. In 2020, they have reported an entire Indian EEZ. So the thousands of papers as a report from that, some hundreds of papers has taken out for the 72 families, and these 72 species were reported in that and again given to that, in which much more of them doubtful species he has noticed, which is highlighting the study is that the taxonomy is again this revisit, and we have to work on this the taxonomic efficiency to improve what kind of species are there present or any kind of endangered species are there and how many, and a new data set is required. That's what Sivadas has reported on that. And this is the studies which I have made in one review on that, working on that. and some kind of 40 studies we have taken it out, in which this is the abundance, the individuals per meter scale, which is this is the minimum, this is the maximum level. So what it is clearly indicating that the studies of different sites, different regions, so the significantly variability is there in the minimum and maximum. You see the where the something like 10 organisms per meter scale reported, and somewhere like 40,000 or 45,000 also reported per meter scale. So which means is a hotspots of these organisms are there, which is spatially variable. So a lot of heterogeneity, the studies are highlighting on that. So this is the one more study, Gopal, our Aishwarya and Ganesh and Raman, and both east and west coast of India studies have been done. And they were clearly highlighting that hotspots are there, and we need to much more concentration on that. And this is typically the depth gradient is a much more concern. So gradually towards the depth and the declining of the species. And many kinds of parameters are impacting on these organisms, not a single master factor. Ecological master factor is controlling, and many factors are controlling on that. These studies are stated that. So after then the Jairos, Joydas, and Jalil and Usha et al. Also reported the same line in that, in the east and west coast of India, particularly in that south and the northern Eastern Arabian Sea. The salinity and sediment and quality of food, particularly in the grain sizes, is a much more driving factors. And some kind of studies, Sukumaran et al. Reported that anthropogenic activities also majorly concerning factors on this diversity distribution of the organisms. So different feeding groups also they have been studied and highlighted that. So variability of the composition of these different feeding groups also the matter of concern in terms of ecological aspect and kinds of food aspect for the fishes. So the another one more study, Jalil et al. Reported on that. So a lot of disturbances are there, in which one of the major thing is that in the coastal regions, the trawl fishing activities. So when we have trawl ban, the before onset of monsoon, you see first here the June time. So when that after trawl ban and before trawl ban, and how the variability is there, the significant variations he has noticed on that. So the standing stock of this benthic organisms enhancing after the trawl ban period, which is a trawl ban period is positively impact actually on these organisms because the stress is lower and the breeding season as well as the larval developmental and the disturbances will be lower. So fast growth of this larvae in these pelagic waters and settlement of this larvae on the bottom sediment on the surface of the bottoms, and again the proliferation of these organisms. So one more study we have done it in this post, the same line in that, and we have noticed on that a trawl ban impact is positively impacting on that. In addition to that, various kinds of stresses are there. So how it will be impacting on that, we have studied on that estimated ecological quality as well, and documented and various kinds of species, and which are the major dominance of organically enriched species, which is a much more common in these coastal regions, highly tolerant species. So what we had to study say is that the species richness and diversity abundance, which is the lower in this shallow coast, which is the impact is much more at portions, physical portions as well. That's the reason poor ecological quality is somewhat moderate to poor, whereas high ecological quality and good ecological quality has been noticed in the towards the deeper as well. So for this that benthic index we have calculated. So after that habitat as well, this organism one more study we have done it. So clear-cut variability of the habitat. So the clay and sand and silty, different fixes per se here, some kind of occurrence and some kind of classicans, crustaceans. You can see this is the muddy substratum and the sandy substratum. So these all are matters. And we have collected these organs for the gut content analysis to understand that, what kind of planktons they are eating. So understand the link between this pelagic as well as the shallow regions of the benthic substratum. The link between, we have the clearly shows here based on our studies. So the strong link between this pelagic as well as benthic coupling between the shallow regions. So this is one more studies have been done the same line in the ecological quality. This is the AMBI and MAMBI. We are used as per this early study suggested by the Savadas et al. 2016. We followed the same things. So now, as we mentioned, another thing is that different stressors are there. Pollution is one of the stress in which this plastic pollution. Yes, this is an emerging trend and various sources which are entering. So we have some of the initial studies we have done in around 2016 in this earlier projects, the present as well in the project we done it, in which we have noticed down that this plastic things in the organisms. Before that, these are two of the small studies from we have done it in the another review in the Northern Indian Oceans, what kind of, the behavior or patterns of these plastics and mega to macro, this micro level, these what kind of studies have been done and what are the lags earlier we have published in this paper and plastics in this Indian Ocean. And after that, in this our Medas and Eastern Arabian Sea, up to 30 meters to around 2000 meters, the surface of the water column, what kind of diversity of these plastics, particularly either pellets or fibers or the size groups and different color groups we have noticed here. And coming to that, another thing is that these are the important thing we need to think about. These various kinds of plastics and different size groups are entering into the various kinds of these organisms based on the size or color or the density of the things, and many kinds of parameters are be helpful for them to transport these plastics to these organisms. Misunderstanding or these organisms we can say that typically they think that these are these food particles equivalent to size of the plankton phyto or zooplankton size particles. Then these organs are consuming or engulfing these particles. Then it will be negative consequences into various levels, either enzymatic level or that gene level. What kind of level? A lot of things will be impact on these organisms, the reproductive capability, these all. And another study we have also done in the some kind of study in that bivalves and gastropods as well, because these are the filter feeders and take up the more filter in these waters and particles present in the waters, they are consuming in that. So this is the things we have reported. And for overall the gap areas, what I want to say that based on the overall the study, what I want to say is that, so the expansion of this oxygen minimum and various kind of boundary layers and the north to south variability or this vertical variability. So the thickness of this oxygen layers are increasing, and where we compare with the earlier studies by Danakvi et al. This all. So now recent studies by Sudhis or that Dr. Gupta, and has been reported that this kind of this perennial natural reforming of this the largest world deoxygenation zone. Then the concern about is that earlier studies have been focused on the benthic or the pelagic organisms, sporadic only, we can say that, because these are one time or two times observations, but the long-term impact, this kind of how it is persistent on these organisms, which is the matter of concerns. So for this overall biogeochemical aspects, the pelagic benthic ecology and overall consequence of these things, the impact on this ecosystem services and livelihood is we need to study. This is the major concern on that. And another study, the pelagic and benthic coupling, as we said, that which is the oxygen is the food for that everyone, because without oxygen it is impossible to survive this organism. Certain permittable levels of the oxygen concentrations are needed. Organisms are otherwise eliminated from that conditions to exist some kind of where this highly oxygenated water is there. So in which some kind of studies by earlier Roman, so it all reported that the decreasing of this oxygen significantly impacting on the fishery resources, because the fishery resources are depending on that, this pelagic or the benthic organisms, because this is the direct food to them. So overall, what we are highlighting is that the blue economy, or this concept, which is the enhancing the growth of this, promotion of this food source, seafood. So before going to the seafood estimation, these all things, we need to understand the process as well. Then only we can see the clear-cut idea of what is happening into the system. Then based on some kind of models or this, what so many things we can say based on the data. And so the intensive observations on this morphologically and intra and interspecific and diversity, ecological aspect is all in-depth studies are needed, rather than this diversity distribution or what kind of species numbers are there and what other species are there. This studies already given a huge information, earlier studies for the greatness for us. So at the same time, now we have to take up this one to next level. For that, this kind of changing of these conditions, how best they are, we can understand the system in the typical conditions, the futuristic level. So, and another one more concept is another threat is that, the marine hotspot, wherever is this marine protected areas, these zones highly impacting this coast. And the worldwide, the problem is that the marine bio innovation. So various kinds of this transportation, for that we are enhancing these ports, and the worldwide development is taking place, and huge growth, and predict that by the the port area, port transportation, already we have a huge traffic jam in that ship jam in these regions, and many incidents are taking place. And of course, at the same time, huge amount of the shipping can transport the huge amount of different kinds of the species and the non-native species, and which is a much more concern on that ecological services aspects. So we need to much more, some studies have been done on that. So we are started on that. We are working on that. And these are some kind of what are the invasive species and their characteristics, and how this species can impact. And this is the briefing about. I have given a small note. I'm not much more on to talk it on that, but we have to concern much more on that in the coastal regions, particularly. Much more we have to think about these species also. Now we are started on that. And overall, in the conclusion point of aspect, what I have observed on that, based on my limited knowledge, so the large scale pattern studies we need to require. So the large scale in this matters we have done it. So most of this unpublished, then I did not speak about much more on that. So far I have spoken about what is the studies have been done. Then the next talk, the module 2, I can with the permits that ECSN, then our own results we can present the next talk. So overall, this biodiversity information, the benthic level phylogeneity, overall services in the Eastern Arabian Sea. So in the large scale basin, we need to understand, and field-based experimental research is majorly needed, and some kind of trait-based analysis recently that Sevadas and Pandey reported, and a similar kind of studies, we have much more focus on that, and overall this ecosystem function to understand that, which can support to SDG 14 as well. So overall understanding of the pelagic and connection research is much more important also. And this kind of deep sea and PANA much more now we are studying about very limited studies, because a lot of logistical issues as well. So highly so for that, the deep sea flora and fauna we need to be studied, including these microbes. And for that, the sustainable utilization of the resources, what we are saying, one of the major theme under this deep ocean mission, we need to much more work on this. And I can conclude it. I would like to thank to that Minister of Earth Sciences to give me this all facilities, and at the same time always supports, and our director MV Ramanmurthy sir, as well as Dr. Gupta sir, and my group head Dr. US Panda sir, as well as this ECN IAOE. And once again, thanks to this Sudish and Pemi, Arvind and Nimit, and thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Naidu, for very detailed and an informative talk. You have touched almost all the aspects of benthic related, the macrofaunal community, their distribution, their controlling factors, what are the different processes that really influence in the Eastern Arabian Sea. At the same time, you have also talked about the macro, the different factors other than natural processes like deoxygenation, microplastics, and etc. So in the chat box, we have a couple of questions, and I will read about those.
Yeah,
The
please.
first question is from Devi Ram. Dr. Naidu, can you comment on how does the presence and diversity of benthic organism influence overall health and stability of coastal marine habitats? And the second question from again, what specific ecosystem service do they provide in terms of regulating this environment?
Yeah. First question first, let me answer it. So how does the presence and diversity of the benthic organisms influences the overall health and stability of the coastal marine habitats? Yes, Devi. Here the first thing is that the presencing of these organisms, which means the certain polychaeta species per se, this as I have mentioned in this, some capitalids or Margillidae family species or the ceratulate species. So which are the key to identify some particular location this organically enriched, and at the same time the oxygen conditions are lower as well. So because utilization of this oxygen. So the organic remineralization, these all things, utilization of this oxygen, as well as this other associated processes like impact on the pH as well. So what I want to say, the stability of the coastal marine habitats means, so how the ecosystem is changing, at least we can say based on the organisms per se in this, as we have earlier studied on that. So the ecological quality. So when the presence of high tolerant species are there, tolerable species, that environment somewhat, that is health of the environment somewhat deteriorating, which means the stressful environment, the habitat is. So whereas the diversity is much more higher, and at the same time, the tolerant rather than the sensitive species much more higher. So then the stability of the habitat is good per se. So I hope maybe I may clarify something on that. And the second, even I will also think about that question. Thank you so much. And what specific ecosystem services do they provide in terms of regulates? Yes. Yeah, the benthic organisms, particularly the much more important in the ecosystem services aspects, particularly regulating in terms, we can say the climate regulate as well, per se in the carbon now. So the atmospheric concentrations are increasing around 420 now that the microatmospheres in this, these all things we are saying. These now the huge amount of this gastropods or bivalves, which are this, huge amount of this carbon can be deposited in that. And at the same time, this some kind of, crustaceans itself that taken up the more amount of the carbon in terms of coral reefs. So huge amount of the carbon sequestration taking place. This kind of, it is a good regulatory service. And at the same time, in terms of say the food aspect, yeah, the goods and services, we can say the huge amount of food we are getting. For that, this for say in this Coringa, now we are studying on that in our own observations. So around 1,000 tons per year, this gastropods and bivalves, the huge potential to this local population. So for these fishermen, yeah, this we can say this highly regulated in that way. I hope maybe somewhat I given to that. The second question, please. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Haditi. And what
data in your analysis?
Yes, yeah. Dear Aditi, actually the source runoff data I haven't used, but this is I have taken from that one of the paper on that. I have cited on the paper as well. So I did not gone that much in that, but yeah, sorry for that.
Yep, there is a comment. It's an important
Yes.
study for assessment of impact of coastal pollution, including oil pollution.
Including
Oil pollution.
oil pollution. Okay, who is that important for the assessment of the coastal pollution, including oil pollution? Important study for assessment of
It kind of comments,
assessment.
compliments, maybe.
Coastal pollution, including oil pollution. Yeah, coastal pollution. A lot of studies have been done on that. So I cannot give a proper answer for that, but in our senior colleague, scientist Dr. Sivadas et al. Done a lot of study on that, and yeah, we can discuss on this question too. On that later, we can, yeah, to Soma, we can respond on that through mail.
Okay, there is another question from
Yes.
Matthew. A very interesting talk. Although the oxygen minimum zone occurs naturally, is there is an
Yes.
increasing signal human impact on the OMZ? Is there is an increasing signal human impact on the OMZ?
Okay. One thing I can say, yes, that is certainly maybe some amount of human influence is there. We cannot neglect it as well. So anthropogenic impact is certainly is there. But when we compare with earlier studies, we cannot overemphasize that much, the anthropogenic impact, the formation of this oxygen. Maybe some amount of coastal regions or, yeah, depletion of oxygens will be there. But these things will be nullified by the, the movement of these currents or some kind of the physical mechanisms. It may not be that much significant unless this huge amount of water masses comes from the deeper to the penetrate into the towards the coast side, I feel. Yeah.
Okay. There's another question from Murfat Saleh. Does hypoxia affect formation of calcium carbonate of animals? Is there any effect of hypoxia on the calcium carbonate formation in animals?
Okay. Yeah, there is a possibility in the, I think this is a negative impact actually. It is a generalized aspect. The larvae needs, and a lot of studies have been done from good age is all aspect, of course, in the lesser living as well. Around 2000 on some studies have been done. So, which is a negatively impact on this Paramaniparas as well. And at the same time, because Paramaniparans is the good indicator species for that in the low oxygen conditions or indicator species as well. So another thing what you asked is the carbonate concentration, which is a negatively impact. So the larvae of gastropods or these bivalves, so they need a particular pH. So the changing of the pH concentrations by the enhancing of this depleted oxygen masses, so that equilibrium may be negative impact on the development of abundance of the development of on particular bivalves and gastropods, that impact directly on the adult stage as well, because proper formation of the cell or deformation of this cell, bivalve cell, I mean gastropod, whatever it may be. So this may be impact on this calcium carbonate taking up capability, I feel. Yeah.
Okay. Since there is no more question in the chat box, Naidu, I have a question. In the Eastern Arabian Sea, we are seeing the upwelling, and because of that, we are seeing a deoxygenation. At the same time, we are seeing a low pH environment. So
yes.
So what really, what is the, which pose major threat to the benthic community, whether the low pH condition or the hypoxic condition, which one has more influence on the benthic organism?
Yeah, thank you, Sudhesh. First of all, it's a very nice, interesting question also for that. See, the first thing what we have a lot of knowledge and idea, much more works focused on this, first of all, this hypoxia or anoxia or whatever normoxia, these all things. The huge data also we are available for that only. So very limited knowledge on the pH aspect particularly. So we have a huge data collected from this meadows. We have to look it into that matters, but right now I'm not aware of that much for your question. Sorry for that. But this is a good question. Thank you. I will look into that direction.
Yep. Thank you, Naidu. I hope
Thank you so much.
there is no more question. I thank you, Naidu, for very interesting and a very informative talk and the discussion also. And thank you all for an active discussion, for listening us, and also for your participation. And we are look forward to welcome you again for the next webinar series in next month, the first Friday of next month. So the Ocean Insight series conducted by the ECSN IOE2, which is generally happening every first Friday of every month. So if anybody is interested to give a talk in like any of the EC, the early career researcher who is interested to give a talk in the webinar series can may contact us, and we will definitely give you a chance as well. Okay, thank you once again. Thank you all for your active presentation. Thank you, Naidu.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for the listening, and thank you so much.